It started like any other school day. I remember sitting at my desk, staring at the clock, waiting for the morning to pass. A few kids were talking loudly in the back. Some were laughing at a joke I had not heard, and others were already scrolling on their phones as usual. Nothing felt different. Nothing felt wrong. If someone had told me that within minutes the world I knew would be gone, I would have laughed. We all would have, then the fire alarm went off. At first no one cared. Everyone groaned and rolled their eyes. We had fire drills so often that it was a joke. A few kids even joked, saying, "Guess we get a break from class." I almost smiled too, but something about the sound felt off. The alarm was too loud, broken almost, like the speakers were tearing apart. My stomach felt tight, like it knew something I did not. I pushed my chair back and went to the door, thinking I would see a teacher waving us outside. When I pulled the door open, my life changed forever. She was standing in the hallway, my math teacher. At first I thought she was sick or maybe injured because her shirt was covered in red, but then I realized the red was not hers. She was bending over a student, her face buried in his neck, making these horrible wet sounds. It took my brain a few seconds to understand she was not helping him. She was eating him. I froze. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My legs felt like they were glued to the floor. Then the student's body slid down the lockers and hit the ground, his eyes open but empty. That is when she looked up at me. Her face was covered in blood dripping down her chin. Her eyes were cloudy, white like glass, and then slowly she smiled at me. That smile broke me. It was not the smile of a teacher, not even of a person. It was something else, something that should not exist. My survival instinct finally kicked in. I slammed the door shut and stumbled back, almost falling over my desk. My classmates burst out laughing at first. They thought I was pulling some kind of prank. I shouted at them, but no one believed me, until the sound came. A heavy thud against the door, then another and another. Her fist slammed against the wood, shaking it on its hinges. Everyone went quiet. Through the small glass window in the door, we saw her face pressed against it, teeth gnashing, blood smeared on the glass. Then we heard more. Footsteps pounding, lockers crashing open, students screaming from every direction. The hallway was no longer safe. The school was no longer safe. That was the moment we all understood. This was not a fire drill. This was not an accident. The outbreak had reached us first, and the first 12 hours of the nightmare had already begun. The classroom was dead silent except for the fire alarm screeching above our heads. No one dared to breathe. All of us stared at the door where her bloody face was pressed against the glass. Her teeth snapped again and again, leaving little smears on the window. The banging on the door grew louder, harder, like she was trying to break it down with her bare hands. Someone whispered, "What is happening?" But no one answered. I could barely think. My hands were shaking so badly I had to hold the edge of my desk to stay steady. Then from down the hall we heard it, another scream. High-pitched, sharp, filled with terror. It cut through the alarm and froze everyone in their seats. It did not stop after 1 second. It kept going, cracking and breaking until it ended with a wet choking sound. That was when panic spread in the room. A girl in the back started crying. My friend grabbed my arm and asked if I was sure about what I saw. I wanted to lie, but I could not. I just nodded. His face turned pale. Another bang rattled the door, then another. But this time it was not just her. More shadows moved in the hallway. We heard footsteps, heavy and uneven, like people were dragging themselves along the floor. A boy sitting near the door stood up and covered the glass window with a piece of cardboard from a project display. "Do not look," he muttered, as if hiding it would make it go away. That was when the screaming outside turned into chaos. Multiple voices, some shouting for help, others begging to be let into classrooms. We could hear lockers slamming open, papers flying, something heavy crashing to the ground. Someone ran past our door so fast their footsteps echoed, followed by growling and the horrible sound of bodies colliding. Inside our classroom, fear boiled over. Half the kids wanted to stay inside and lock the door. The other half whispered that we should run for it while we still had a chance. The argument grew louder until our teacher, who had been frozen at her desk, finally spoke. Her voice shook as she said, "Stay calm. Stay inside. Help will come." But none of us believed her. We had all heard the screams. Help was not coming. Then came the sound that made my blood turn to ice. It was not screaming this time. It was the sound of chewing. Wet, slow chewing just outside the door. Someone had fallen, and now they were being eaten alive only a few feet from us. A few kids clamped their hands over their mouths to stop from screaming. One girl threw up into her backpack. We were trapped. The alarm screamed. The walls shook. And outside, our friends and teachers were being torn apart. I realized then that the school we thought was safe had already become a graveyard. The minutes dragged on like hours. We sat in silence, every one of us, listening to the noises outside the door. The chewing sound faded, but new ones took its place. Heavy steps moved up and down the hallway. Sometimes they stopped right at our door. Sometimes we heard nails scratching against the wood, slow and careful, like they knew we were inside. Nobody wanted to speak. Even breathing felt too loud. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep the air quiet as it rushed in and out. My heart was beating so fast that I thought everyone could hear it. The fire alarm finally stopped. The ringing silence that followed was even worse. Every little sound in the school now echoed 100 times louder. A chair creaked. Someone's shoe scraped against the floor. A single whisper carried across the room, and then a knock. It was soft at first. 3 little taps against the door. My stomach twisted. None of us moved. We waited, staring at each other, eyes wide, every face pale with fear. Then the knock came again, louder this time, sharper, almost angry. A boy near the door whispered. It might be a student, someone alive, but I shook my head. I remembered the blood on our math teacher's mouth. I remembered the screams in the hallway. Whatever was outside was not one of us anymore. The knocking stopped. For a few seconds, everything was quiet. We all let out the breaths we had been holding. But just as hope flickered in our minds, the sound came back, this time fist pounding hard, shaking the entire door in its frame. A girl near the window screamed and covered her ears. The cardboard over the glass shook with every hit. I thought it would give way at any second. Our teacher stood up suddenly. Her legs were trembling, but she forced herself to the front of the class. "Stay calm," she said, though her voice cracked halfway through the words. She grabbed a chair and shoved it under the door handle. It rattled but held, for now. The pounding stopped again, then silence. But silence was no comfort anymore. It only meant something worse was about to happen. I turned my head toward the window. Outside, the sky had turned gray, heavy clouds swallowing the light. On the football field, I saw figures moving, slow, staggering shapes dragging themselves across the grass. Even from far away, I could tell something was wrong with the way their bodies bent and twisted. We were trapped. Outside was death. Inside was fear. And the walls around us felt thinner with every passing second. Someone whispered, "We cannot just sit here. We need to do something," but no one answered. No one knew what to do. We were just kids in a classroom, and the world outside had already ended. The classroom was growing darker as the clouds outside thickened. The air felt heavy, pressing down on our chests. Every second stretched like forever. We could not stay here. We all knew it. Our teacher sat against the wall, her face pale, her hands shaking. She looked more lost than any of us. For the first time, I realized the adults had no answers. Whatever this was, nobody had prepared for it. We were on our own. A boy named Eric broke the silence. His voice was low but clear. "If we stay here, we die. If they break through the door, there is no way out. We need to move." The words sent a cold shiver down the room. Nobody argued because we all knew he was right. But moving meant stepping into the hallway where the screams had come from. Moving meant facing the unknown. Where would we even go? A girl asked, clutching her backpack like it could protect her. "The gym," Eric said quickly. "It has back exits. Big doors. Maybe we can get outside and run." It sounded crazy, but it also sounded like hope. And hope was something we were desperate for. We gathered near the back of the classroom, whispering ideas, arguing over details. Every sound made us flinch, afraid the pounding on the door would start again. Finally, we agreed. We would move as a group. Quiet, fast. No matter what we saw, no one would scream. The teacher tried to speak, but her voice failed. She nodded instead, eyes wet with tears. Eric led the way. He pushed a desk aside and carefully removed the chair, bracing the door. The wood groaned but held together. He motioned for us to be ready. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst through my chest. He opened the door just an inch. The hallway beyond was dark, lit only by a few flickering emergency lights. The smell hit us first, thick, rotten, like spoiled meat left in the sun. My stomach churned. The hall was quiet. Too quiet. We stepped out one by one, holding our breaths. The floor creaked under our shoes. We moved like shadows, hugging the walls, every sound magnified in our ears. Then from down the hall came a sound that froze us in place. A low growl, wet, broken breathing, the sound of something dragging itself across the floor. I glanced at Eric. His face was stone, but I saw his hands trembling. He motioned us forward faster now. We had to reach the gym before the thing in the dark reached us. We crept past open classroom doors. Some were empty, some were not. I forced myself not to look too closely, but the smell of blood and the faint outlines on the floor told me enough. The gym was close. Just one more hallway, just one more turn. But as we rounded the corner, we stopped dead. They were already there. At the end of the hallway, under the dim emergency lights, 3 figures stood. At first, my mind tried to explain them away. Maybe they were students. Maybe they were teachers. Maybe they were survivors like us. But then one of them turned. The face was gray, skin stretched thin, lips torn. Dried blood covered the chin, dripping onto the shirt that had once been clean. The eyes were white, empty, searching for movement. It did not look human anymore. The second figure swayed from side to side like it could not balance. Its arm hung broken, bone showing through the skin. With each step forward, it scraped the floor with a shoe that was almost gone. The sound of rubber dragging against tile echoed down the hall. The third was worse. It was small, a girl. Her school uniform was stained dark, her hair matted with blood. She could not have been older than 12. Her head jerked unnaturally like her neck was too weak to hold it. She made a sound, a soft clicking noise as if her jaw was broken. Someone behind me gasped. Too loud. All 3 of them turned at once. The silence shattered. A growl filled the hallway, deep and wet. The sound shot through my bones. Their movements changed from slow to fast, sudden, violent. "They were coming for us! Run!" Eric shouted. His voice cracked, but it was enough. We bolted down the hall, shoes slamming the floor. The noise exploded like thunder. Behind us, the creatures screamed. Not words, not human, just hunger. My legs felt weak, but fear pushed me forward. I could hear them gaining, claws of broken nails scraping against lockers, the heavy pounding of feet not far behind. We reached the double doors of the gym. Eric shoved them open with his shoulder, and we spilled inside. The echo of our footsteps filled the empty space. The gym looked massive, but it was no safe haven. The far side had broken glass where a window had been shattered. The cold night air blew in, carrying the same rotten stench from the halls. "Lock the doors," someone screamed. Eric and I threw our weight against the doors, slamming them shut just as the first impact hit. The wood shook violently. A gray hand shot through the crack, clawing, reaching. We forced it back and pushed the lock down. For a moment, silence returned. Only our breathing filled the space. But we knew the doors would not hold forever. We looked around the gym. The basketball hoops hung low, the bleachers empty and shadowed. The emergency exit glowed faint red on the far wall. It was our way out, but the pounding on the doors grew louder. Cracks began to form in the wood. If we wanted to survive, we had to move now, and as I turned to lead the way, I saw something move in the shadows of the bleachers. We were not alone. At first I thought it was nothing, a trick of the shadows. My eyes were still adjusting to the dim red glow of the emergency lights, and my mind wanted to believe it was empty. But then it moved again. Something crouched between the rows of the bleachers, small, hunched, hidden in the dark. I froze, staring, trying to make sense of it. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Eric followed my gaze. He nodded slowly, his face pale. The pounding on the gym doors continued, but it felt far away compared to what was inside with us. The wood groaned, dust falling from the frame, but all I could focus on was the figure shifting between the seats. It was breathing, not fast, not loud, but steady, like an animal waiting for its prey to come closer. The others began to notice. Fear spread across their faces. A few steps back, a girl whimpered and covered her mouth with both hands, trying not to make a sound. Then the shape began to rise. A child. A boy maybe 10 years old. His arms dangled loosely, fingers bent in the wrong direction. His head tilted far to the side, too far, like his neck had broken. His mouth was open, but no sound came out. He just stood there watching us. "Maybe he is still human," someone whispered. But I knew he was not. His eyes glowed faint in the red light, cloudy, lifeless. The same as the ones in the hallway. He moved suddenly, sprinting down the bleachers with a speed that made my chest tighten. We screamed. Eric grabbed a metal pole from the side of the gym and swung it with everything he had. The sound of impact rang out, hollow and sharp. The boy's body hit the floor hard, limbs twisting, but he still tried to crawl forward, fingers scratching the ground, reaching for Eric's leg. I kicked him away. Once. Twice. The third time, his skull cracked against the wood floor, and finally he stopped moving. Silence fell again, heavy and choking. Everyone stared at the small body. Nobody spoke. Some looked away. Others just kept staring, unable to process what had happened. I wanted to cry. He had been a kid once, someone's son, someone's friend. But in that moment, all I felt was relief that he had stopped moving. The pounding at the doors reminded us we had no time to think. The wood was splintering. It would not hold much longer. "We have to move," Eric said, his voice shaking but firm. We turned toward the emergency exit. The glowing red sign was our only hope, but as we ran, another sound reached us. Not from the doors this time, from above. I looked up. On the catwalks high above the gym floor, more shadows moved. We had not just trapped ourselves with one, there were many. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The red glow from the exit sign stretched across the ceiling, and every shadow seemed to move on its own. But then one of the shapes leaned forward and the light caught its face. It was not my imagination. There were at least 5 of them on the catwalk above us, crawling like insects, their pale hands gripping the railing, their heads jerked in sharp, unnatural movements, like broken dolls trying to stand upright. One of them let out a low groan that echoed across the gym, and the sound made the air feel colder. The others in the group began to panic. A boy shoved past me, pointing to the exit. "Run, run now," he cried. But the pounding on the main doors grew louder, the wood cracking. If we rushed to the exit, the noise would draw everything outside straight to us. Eric grabbed my arm. "Wait, look." One of the things above us began to descend, climbing down the metal frame of the bleachers with impossible speed. Its hands slammed against the bars, each hit sharp, steady, closer and closer. I could not breathe. The others lost control. Some bolted toward the exit sign, their shoes squeaking on the polished floor. The sound was enough. The rest of the creatures dropped from the catwalk all at once. They hit the floor with a sickening thud, bodies bending at angles that would have broken any normal bones. Then they rose, twitching, snarling, eyes locked on the running students. The gym erupted into screams. I ran too. My legs moved before I even thought about it. Eric stayed beside me, pulling me toward the storage room door near the corner of the gym. It was not much, but it was closer than the exit. We slammed the door shut just as one of the creatures reached it, its fingers squeezing through the gap before Eric forced it closed. I pushed a metal bar through the handle, locking it in place. Inside it was pitch black. Dusty mats and broken sports gear surrounded us. The only sound was the muffled pounding of the creatures outside. Claws scraping against the wood, someone whispered, "We are trapped." I pressed my back against the wall, trying to think, trying to breathe. Trapped was better than dead. For now, but then I heard it, a faint hiss. I turned my head. At the far end of the storage room in the dark, something was already inside with us. A pair of eyes opened, glowing faintly in the shadows. We had not escaped. We had walked into another cage. The air inside the storage room was heavy, filled with the smell of dust, sweat, and old wood. For a moment, no one dared to move. The only sound was the pounding of the creatures outside, their fists beating against the door like drums. Then from the far corner, that sound returned, a faint hiss, steady and sharp like steam escaping from a broken pipe. I turned my head slowly, my heart beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. 2 pale eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. They blinked once, then stayed open, unblinking, fixed on us. Someone whispered, "No. No, no, no." Eric reached for the flashlight in his bag, his hands shaking. He clicked it on. The weak beam cut through the dark and landed on the figure in the corner. It was not standing. It was crouched low, knees bent the wrong way, arms wrapped tightly around its chest like it was hugging itself, its head tilted at an angle that made my stomach twist, and its mouth. Its mouth was wide open, stretched too far, the skin at the corners torn. The hiss grew louder. Then it moved. It did not crawl. It did not walk. It scuttled across the floor on its hands and feet like a spider, the flashlight beam bouncing with its every twitch. We screamed and backed into the wall. The others pressed against one another. Nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. Eric swung the light directly at it. The creature recoiled, hissing louder now, covering its face as if the light burned. "Keep it on him!" I shouted. Eric's arm shook, but he held the beam steady. The creature shrieked, a sound that pierced straight through my ears. It backed into the corner again, twitching, clawing at the wall like it wanted to climb. Outside, the pounding on the door grew frantic. The creatures out there must have heard it scream. "We cannot stay here," Eric said. His voice cracked. "But where do we go?" Someone cried. I looked at the other side of the room. There was a vent, low to the ground, half covered by a broken mat. Small, narrow, but maybe big enough to crawl through. "It is that, or die here," I said. We moved fast. Eric kept the light on the creature, its body shivering and twitching in the corner, eyes burning holes through us. I pulled the mat aside, grabbed the vent cover, and ripped it off with a loud snap of rusted screws. One by one, we squeezed inside. The air was stale, thick with dust, but it was escape. As I pulled myself in last, I dared one last look at the creature. It had stopped covering its face, and it was smiling. The vent was smaller than I expected. The metal walls pressed against my shoulders as I crawled forward, the sound of my breath echoing in the narrow space. Each push of my hand scraped my palms against cold, rusted steel. Behind me, I heard Eric whisper, "Keep moving. Do not stop." The others shuffled in the dark, their movements loud in the silence. Every sound seemed to travel forever in the tunnel. The clank of a shoe, the scrape of a knee, the shallow gasps of panic. I tried not to think about the thing we had left behind in the storage room. I tried not to think about its smile, but the memory clung to me like a shadow. Then I heard it, not behind us. Ahead, a faint tapping, like nails on metal. Slow, patient, waiting. I froze. The tunnel was so tight there was no room to turn around, no room to see where it was coming from.
"All I could do was listen, tap, tap, tap. Do you hear that?"
I whispered. The line behind me stopped. A few muffled sobs rose, then silence again. Tap, tap, tap. The sound grew louder, closer. My chest tightened. I wanted to back up, to retreat, but Eric hissed, "Forward. We cannot go back. They will break through the door." He was right. The pounding from the gym still echoed faintly through the vents. It would not be long before the creatures flooded inside, so I forced myself forward. One hand, one knee, then the other. Every inch felt like a mile. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe. My lungs burned, the tapping stopped. That was worse. I reached a junction where the tunnel split into two directions, left or right. Both paths stretched into darkness. "What now?" Eric whispered behind me. Before I could answer, the tapping returned. But now it came from both sides, left, right, surrounding us. The others began to panic, whispering, begging, their voices filling the vent like trapped birds. The sound of their fear made my head spin. Then something brushed against my shoe. I kicked back in terror, my foot slamming into the tunnel wall. A hiss answered, long and sharp, filling the air with cold dread. "Move," Eric shouted. We crawled as fast as we could, the metal groaning under our weight. My knees bled, my palms stung, but I did not stop. None of us did. The tunnel narrowed again, pressing tighter. I saw a faint glow ahead, another vent cover, light spilling through the cracks. Hope. I reached for it, dragging myself forward. The tapping behind us grew furious now, echoing like thunder through the tunnel. I slammed my shoulder against the vent cover once, twice. On the third hit, it burst open, metal clattering to the ground. One by one, we spilled out into the unknown. And for a moment, I thought we were safe. But then I looked around. We were not in the school anymore. Cold air hit my face the second I tumbled out of the vent. It was sharp, heavy with smoke, and filled with the sour stench of rot. I coughed hard, my chest aching as I tried to catch my breath. Eric crawled out behind me, dragging two others with him. One by one, the survivors spilled onto the cracked pavement, gasping, shaking, some of them crying. For the first time in hours, there was no pounding on doors, no hissing in the dark. Only silence, but it was not the kind of silence that brought peace. It was the kind that made your skin crawl. We were no longer in the school. The vent had led us to the back lot, an open space behind the gym where delivery trucks once parked. The chain-link fence that surrounded it was torn wide open, as if something huge had forced its way through. I looked around, my stomach sinking. The world outside was gone. Streetlights hung broken, their wires sparking faintly. The sky was an ugly gray filled with ash and smoke. Abandoned cars lined the street, their doors hanging open, windows shattered. And everywhere, the smell of death. Someone whispered, "We made it out." But I knew better. In the distance, I saw them. Dozens of figures staggering in the fog, their movements jerky, their heads snapping toward us the moment we stepped into the open. Eric cursed under his breath. They know we are here. We had no weapons, no plan. Just the open street in front of us and the endless swarm closing in from every side. The others began to break. Some begged to run back inside. Some dropped to their knees and sobbed. I grabbed Eric's arm. "We cannot stop here. If we stay, we die." He nodded, though his face was pale. His eyes darted across the lot until they landed on an old school bus, parked crooked near the edge of the fence. The windows were cracked, but it looked intact. "That," he said. "If we can reach it, we might make it." The group hesitated, but the groans from the fog grew louder, closer. There was no choice. We ran. Every step felt heavier, every breath sharper. The figures broke into a sprint as soon as they saw us, their limbs flailing, their mouths wide open. One of the survivors tripped. A scream cut through the air, high and desperate, then ended in a wet, tearing sound. None of us looked back. The bus door was hanging open. Eric shoved it aside and we piled in. The smell of old leather and rust hit my nose. I stumbled toward the back, pressed against the seat, my whole body shaking. Outside, shadows slammed against the glass. Faces smeared against the windows, teeth gnashing, eyes white and unblinking. We had escaped the school. But the first 12 hours were not over. They had only just begun.